All right. Well, welcome everyone to our partner webinar series. Today's session, Offsite Storage in the Remote Working World. I can see we've got some people still joining the session, but we are going to go ahead and get started. So I am Bill Bradford. I will be your moderator and host today. I'm excited to join our experts from Access. We have Jean Mackie and we have Joe Nadzam as we explore this topic. If you are not, if we could go to the next slide. There we go. If you are not currently an Arma member, welcome to today's webinar. I would highly encourage you to visit arma.org to learn more about all the benefits of becoming a professional member. As you can see on your screen here, we have over 5,000 members internationally, peer networks of information management and information governance professionals. Some of the benefits of membership are local and international community, which would include local chapters putting on local events, education and certifications, career job resources, and member-only webinars. Visit www.arma.org for more information. And as a long-standing member of Arma, I would highly encourage you to take a look at what Arma has to offer. I've been a member for between 16, 17 years. I kind of lose track after that many years. And I will tell you the network of people that I have been able to build and the advancement in my career that Arma has offered me is something that I know I wouldn't have gotten somewhere else. So I would highly encourage you to go to arma.org for full membership details. Arma InfoCon, we want you to hopefully please join us October 17th through the 20th. Take part in over 60 sessions, 5 keynotes, and the opportunity to meet with industry-leading business partners like Access. There will be networking events and more. This year's event is approved for 27.5 IGP credits. The number of credits that will be approved through the ICRM will be forthcoming, so we'll get that information out to you as well. You can find all the details on InfoCon by visiting arma.org and clicking the conference tab. So just a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions for our experts today, please make sure you put those in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We will be sending out the presentation and a link to view the session, so keep an eye out in your email box for that to be coming very soon. So I'd like to take a second to extend a thank you to the wonderful people at Access. It's because of their support that we are able to bring you additional programs and services. When considering products and services for your business, we hope you consider partners like Access, who not only support Arma, but support you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jean and Joe.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate you having us today. We'll take a quick minute to go through our agenda, and then we'll jump right into the content. So the first part of today, we're just going to talk through a little bit about the information management journey and where you might be at with your organization on that. So don't be shy, no wrong answers here. And as we'll discuss more, there's certainly been some changes to many organizations as far as where they fall within that journey. We're going to go through how to evaluate your program. So maybe you're not sure where you're at within the journey currently. So we'll give you some tips on how you can take a look at where you might be. We're going to go through some different solutions that we've seen, mixing remote hybrid work environments, and then also combining physical and digital records. And then last but not least, what to look for within a RIM business partner.
So we wanted to start off with a brief poll question. Don't worry, no wrong answers. If you were to put in your words, where would you place your organization's RIM program maturity? Don't worry, we're not reporting your answers back. Just want to get a flavor for where everybody sees their organization on their RIM journey. So if you want to go ahead and choose one of the options on that poll, We'll give everybody a few seconds to go through that, and then we'll keep going. And Jen, I can't see where the responses are, so if you can let us know. Or
yeah, we're at about 50%. So I'm gonna let it go a little bit longer.
Great, thank you. Okay, so it looks like we have a pretty fair amount of folks in the middle, which is great. Like we said, there's no wrong answers. Up next is just beginning, and a bunch of experts out there too, so that's exciting. Do you want to go to the next slide? I think you're still on the, there we go. So this graph should look familiar to a lot of you. This is the Arma International Principles Maturity Model. And I think where everybody's saying they're sort of in the middle, that's probably in development to essential. And again, no wrong answers on where you landed on this chart. It is a journey. Everybody just being Arma members and even attending the webinar today says that you and your organization put emphasis on the importance of a solid RIM program. So you know, that's great, and really partnering with an offsite provider or other professionals in the industry are really there to help you advance your journey forward to meet your organization's goals as you work to protect and manage your information. Joe, any thoughts on this one before we move on?
I think it really plays into the slide. You can jump ahead, Jamie. So no matter where you're at along that journey, I think what we've seen is many organizations have had to take a step back because COVID-19, the pandemic, this really changed RIM for many different, not only business partners, but many different businesses. And no matter where you're at on this spectrum of full return to work, hybrid return, or no return, certainly you're impacted by business partners, suppliers that are dealing with this. So we've just really found that records managers and RIM programs need to find flexible solutions that allow them to handle the change from regular office environments to remote work.
Right. So this is what we're calling the new normal, if you will, which is the new environment that businesses are finding themselves in as a result of the pandemic and what that's done to business in general. To start, we just heard people are working from anywhere. That could be a combination of remote, hybrid, fully back to the office. Each of these different scenarios present different challenges and opportunities as it pertains to your RIM program and your organization's information. Organizations are rethinking the office. I know we at Access can certainly relate to this. That not only includes our physical footprint, but the technologies and tools that they're investing in to keep their team members and their organization operating and productive. We're also seeing a huge push towards digitization. The pandemic has been a catalyst, if you will, to organizations really finally taking their digital strategy seriously and making it a priority. And of course, the more flexible all the tools and resources that you and your organization are using, the more successful you've been able to come through this pandemic successfully while still maintaining all of the information and confidentiality around your information that's so critical to your business.
So as Jean mentioned, with remote-based work, it becomes a little more challenging when you have limited access to your company's documents. If there's files that are stored in an office, but all your employees are remote, it doesn't exactly bode well for the teams being able to get the information that they need. Also poses security issues with how records are managed, whether those are electronic or physical. And then, of course, complexities of records management with this new remote-based world. This requires new skills, different processes, and then also keeping up with any changing regulations that may come about. I think this one is me as well, Jean. So to just continue down the path of files being stored in offices, one of the things that we've seen a lot of, and Jean mentioned, we've had to look at quite a bit within Access as well, is how we're utilizing our physical space. So comparing the costs for renting a space or having additional space for documents to be stored on site it's significant cost to an organization. So at the topic of being able to use offsite storage and moving more records to a business partner becomes more of a financially beneficial scenario, as well as just accessibility. So have some basic numbers here that show you guys some of the findings that we've had. But moving documents to the cloud or to offsite storage, it doesn't just increase your accessibility, but it can also drastically reduce your costs.
Right. So as Joe mentioned, those are some attractive numbers that business owners and leadership are having to consider, especially coming out of the pandemic when revenues may have been impacted. So although it may not be the most desirable choice, you're used to having your records at your fingertips, and now the decision is being made to move those off-site, you need to be prepared for that. You no longer have that bank of cabinets or that file room at your fingertips to go grab what you need. Now you need to be thinking more of how would I access this information if I can't get to it, if I am working from home. And one of those answers has really been digitization. So as we mentioned, businesses are reducing real estate. That's driving the decision to move information off-site. But moving them off-site doesn't entirely solve the problem. That still makes accessing that information for remote workers a challenge. I mean, honestly, if you're having to physically access your records, it can be a disruption to your productivity, whether that be if you've chosen, some other offsite solution. Now you may be having to go access that information or just everything that comes with it. And it can also, as Joe mentioned, increase risk. So not only the risk of physically moving information from where it was originally housed to where it is now, moving it back and forth as it's needed, moving it internally, or moving it to remote locations that are no longer under your four walls of security, that all enters risk. Not to mention, again, we are in a pandemic. Now it's more person-to-person contact if you are having to physically access those records, which is another thing to be considering. So this is all driving the push to digitization. Businesses, I'm sorry, oh, you can stay back there, yeah. The business case for supporting a digital transformation seems easy enough. Organizations are investing in the ability to have a mobile workforce. So if everything's electronic, it doesn't entirely matter where their workforce sits, they can still access their information. It improves the ability to access information and reduces those variable costs. Again, that real estate component, the physical labor component of accessing information. But again, there's that piece too. If you're physically accessing information in a remote environment, now you have to increase security, and all of that comes into play. It's important to remember, though, a blended approach to digitization is what we view as best practice. So that doesn't mean go scan everything that you've ever touched. It doesn't mean scan every piece of paper. That is certainly a luxury that, there are partners out there that are happy to help you with. But we find that hybrid approach to be the most consistent the most financial friendly and best return on investment. And what that means is a blend of archiving your inactive records, digitizing your active or current information, and if possible, your new information is born in a digital format. That blend really, like I said, allows that flexibility in the workforce, and it's also the what we find to be one of the more cost-effective options to really move into that digital space. We can take a deeper look on the next slide at some of the other benefits and savings and efficiencies that organizations can gain as they move into that digital footprint.
Hey, Jean and Joe, we've got a question that come in. I think
Sure.
this is a good place for it since we're talking about savings and those kinds of things. The
Sure.
question comes from Sarah, and it's, I appreciate that there are opportunity cost savings for freeing up footprint, meaning probably office space, but there are costs to offsite storage as well. Are you able to speak to the relative costs?
We certainly can. I think it's a little bit of a case-by-case basis. You're absolutely right. There is a tipping point. I think on that slide, we had sort of an average square foot cost. And when you factor everything else in, like I said, there's that tipping point. I think once you factor in the firm or the organization's ability to sort of let go of some of the security components, the labor components, your offsite partners are doing this to scale. So are able to typically achieve those same tasks at a lower rate than the organization or the firm could themselves. To quote firm dollars, again, it's a little more case by case, but it is a fair question. There is absolutely a tipping point where the real estate, if you're in lower Manhattan, it's a much easier case to be made versus some of the suburbs where real estate's a little cheaper. It might be a different return on investment.
Okay, and then maybe a follow-up to that. Do you guys see that companies like yourself are opening up your review rooms to customers who are working remotely, come in and review records?
Absolutely. And sorry, Joe, to take all these, jump in as you'd like. No, that's certainly something that we have done, and we've heard others doing the same. We had to shift our business when the pandemic hit, and that meant introducing new services, being more flexible to clients that did need to come on site. Of course, we do need to keep COVID protocols in mind. So we have contact tracing, wearing masks, things like that. But absolutely, we want to be as helpful as we can to those clients that have now lost the ability to keep their inventory on site. They've given us the ability to partner with them. And with that comes a little more flexibility for understanding the situation that they're in.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Next is operational efficiencies. As we said, having information at your fingertips certainly can reduce time spent perusing file rooms, physically moving information within your office, and having to keep track of its chain of custody, where that record last moved. While digital records do come with their own level of security risk, network and cloud-based storage is a controlled environment that's improving in security by the minute. I'd say that I know for us personally and other businesses we're speaking to, we are investing in digital security hand over fist. That's where we need to make those investments. So it's top of mind, and one of the things that a partner can share with you as far as what they're doing to ensure that those digital records are secure. Ease of access also makes audits to your business or audits that your business is subject to that much less intrusive on your day-to-day and your productivity. Having everything, again, in a digital format where you can provide that to an auditor in a secure method makes that much easier and helps you avoid any penalties or fines that you could otherwise be facing for delay or inability to produce information. I think it's important to note too that in a remote environment, an organization's ability to share information amongst themselves is greatly improved when that information is in a digital format, especially when you are in a remote work environment. It improves collaboration and, again, reduces contact and cost. slide.
Great points there, Jean. I think if the pandemic taught us anything, it's really the importance of business continuity and flexibility within our organizations. Many of you, as well as many of the business partners that we work with, really had to rethink what their strategy was and shift their resources and priorities as we move through the different phases. And this really translates to RIM programs as well. Different organizations had to incorporate the best of GARP along with digital capabilities to be able to maintain focus and meet the needs of not only their employees, but also their customers as well. So understanding those business objectives and maintaining that flexibility has really been of the utmost importance over the last year.
So if your organization has made the decision to move information offsite, whether that's the result of the pandemic or not, we just encourage you to make sure you're choosing a partner that understands you and your company's goals and objectives and are willing to collaborate with you on how to achieve those goals. You want to make sure that they're coming to the table with best practice and recommendations. So you shouldn't be in this alone. You shouldn't be looking at an offsite partner as just out of sight, out of mind, and now it's out of my file room and in yours. Really partner with that third party or your offsite partner to make sure you're getting all of the expertise and advantage of working with a professional in the field. Ask how they've adapted to a remote work environment and while still protecting information, both physical and digital, and how they're protecting their team and their clients. That's important, and that's something that I don't think we ever thought we'd have to ask, but here we are today, and it's one of those things that's necessary. I know from our perspective, we've shared our COVID protocols with other organizations to not have everybody recreate the wheel. The quicker we're all rowing in the same direction on this thing, the sooner we're on the other end of it. So I just really encourage you, if that is the direction that your organization is moving, don't be afraid. It's obviously a change from having information at your fingertips in your physical space, but they're professionals for a reason. And if you're partnering with the right one, they'll treat you as that partner and make sure that you're achieving your goals with ease.
Well, we've got another question if I can throw that in, because I think this again is a great place for it. And
absolutely.
Being a client of a company that provides the types of services that you guys provide, and it actually is access. So I thank you for the work that your teams have done on behalf in COVID protocol and the adjustments that you guys have made for the requirements of businesses like ours. But the question is, does your company deliver records to clients at their home? And if so, what are the caveats that those businesses have put on those deliveries? In other words, delivery must be handed to the employee, not just dropped off at the house, the apartment, etc.
Jean, I can start and you jump in with anything that you know. To the best of my knowledge, we do not deliver to residential address. When we have a situation and the way we've handled assisting clients that have people working remotely is we've set them up with the scan on demand options, where through our online portals, they're able to access their documents electronically, which typically is a more secure option as well as a little more efficient, because then there's any number of users that can access that document at once versus having to use the physical and ship that information around.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like I said before, this is new territory for everybody. So we're all trying to be flexible. One of the things that we've been very keen on is limiting contact. So even when we are making deliveries to businesses, we're limiting the passing of handhelds for signatures and things like that. Deliveries to residents, it gets a little tricky. We obviously want to make sure that we're delivering to authorized locations. So that scan on demand option felt like the most secure. And also to your earlier point, Bill, opening up our facilities to folks coming in and accessing information has been sort of our next best thing.
Okay, and I'm assuming once the pandemic is over, Access and other providers will be getting back to their normal delivery schedules and time frames and those kinds of things. I'm assuming this has really put an adjustment for you guys in regards to those services that you offer on a daily basis. So is this the new normal, or do you see things changing back to services you offered previously?
I think it's too soon to tell, and Joe, jump in. Right, any adjustments to any delivery schedules have really been based on the feedback from the clients, them not being in office. We didn't want to be wasting trips to an empty office. So it's been really based on client feedback and what the market was telling us. Unfortunately, we're still kind of in the thick of it. So I don't know that we've made a firm determination of what our clients will be asking for as we come out of this.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would just say the same. I mean, it's really the activity levels that we're seeing now still have not made it back to what we saw pre-pandemic. And many of the organizations that we work with are still in that hybrid or remote model where it's really challenging for them as well to receive material more frequently. So as Jean mentioned, most of the changes that we've made throughout the pandemic to our models have been based on working closely with our clients and understanding what the needs were. So I did see a follow-up question that came in around, are we scanning the customer requests? And I just want to clarify, we're scanning where that is the request. So we are still delivering physical on a daily basis as needed, but when we have those situations where a client's working remote or they're in a hybrid environment and they need records, we do have that scan on demand option available. And we're certainly promoting that with our clients as the most efficient way for them to receive their material when it's feasible.
Okay. I think we've got, we have another scanning question, if I can plop that in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
When an offsite record is scanned on demand and provided to the requester, what suggestions can you provide with regard to encouraging the requester to not print the record, or worse, where to go? Let's see, rebarcoding it as a duplicate physical record?
Oof, yeah, that is a great question, and of course we know that it happens, right? We know that people get electronic delivery and they turn around and print it right out. I mean, our recommendation would be that record stays in electronic format and the users interact with it through the system, because as you mentioned, creating a duplicate of something is not advised.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that besides, establishing best practice within your organization is certainly part of that. Understanding that creating duplicate records in that fashion is not only adding risk to your organization, because now there's another copy of that data, but also now it's in physical form. So I think it's just a partnership of sharing best practice and locking up everyone's printers. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I think we have another question on it, but I think this question could be a topic all its own, and it's around any best practices or best practice processes for going paper light. And so I think that could be an entire webinar in and of itself. But any little nuggets you guys want to throw out for that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do a whole nother topic on that one, Bill. I think it goes back to what I mentioned before of that hybrid model. So your existing paper, it already exists. So keeping that in archive, digitizing active stuff and best practice. If it can be born digital, then you're moving towards that paper light environment. Looking at what it is that you are creating in a paper format and really getting buy-in from all levels of your organization to understand that the paper may have been a nice to have, but not a need to have, is really where you start to shift that mindset. So it is a little bit more of a mindset than anything else, having people admit and agree that the paper format served its purpose, but now you have just as viable an option in electronic format, is where that starts to shift.
Well, I know you guys have one slide left. I want to let you guys get through that slide, and then we can take on the rest of the questions.
Great.
Right. So while our topic today is offsite storage, we did want to just show how all of these different information management services are connected. So these are the services that we at Access offer, that many other business partners can offer as well, and just really shows the full chain of custody throughout the process. So our information governance deals with record holds and all of the coding that goes into the metadata. And then, of course, the offsite storage we've talked about. The scanning and digitization plays into the digital document storage and how you can really adapt from just being in paper to having that hybrid environment. And I'll back up 1 second, just that last question that was asked about how to get started with scanning and digitizing and going paper light. I think the biggest mistake that we've seen over the years is organizations try to do everything at once. And Jean mentioned it, you can't just go and expect to scan everything that's ever been created. It's going to be way too expensive, way too much of a change all at once. So really small steps in that process of what we've seen work the best, and really moving into that hybrid environment and understanding that there's almost always going to be some need for offsite storage when you have a legacy business. It's still the most economical way to maintain that information. But when it comes to those more active records, that's where the scanning and the digital document management, those come together. So having all of these options under one roof with one partner has really become a benefit to many businesses. And then, of course, last but not least in this is the secure shredding, destruction, disposition of documents. And this is something that has changed a little bit, right? With the pandemic and with more people working from home, you get into those situations that we talked about where people are printing out records at home and they have documents in their possession that need to be securely shredded. So this topic has come up quite a bit. We've worked with a number of our customers on different solutions to be able to manage that. And I guess what I would share with the group here today, we've heard a number of different scenarios, a number of different things that people are doing to implement process and policy around how this is handled. If you already have a secure shred service, what we find to be the most secure option is to be able to supply your end users with some form of either secure envelopes or boxes, and to store those records that need to be securely shredded until they can take those to the office and place those in the secure shred console or bin that is being provided by your business partner. So there's situations where we're working with clients that we send them out those secure envelopes or boxes, and then they find times or schedule times that they go to their office and drop those off. But that's just an idea and certainly a consideration that should be made as we all have more people working remote. I like Jean's idea of just locking up the printers and not letting that happen, but of course that's not the reality.
All right, well, there's
that's it for us.
Just to piggyback off of one of the questions regarding the home deliveries, Sandra's asking if there's any plans to change whether you're delivering to a residence or not.
Yeah, I think it's something that we will continue to evaluate as the need continues to rise. It's something that when we work with a lot of the organizations that we talk to, I think there's mixed feelings from a security standpoint, from a risk standpoint. Many of our clients that we've talked to about it, they don't necessarily want to go down that path. I understand the benefit that the user would have, but introduces some new challenges for us as a business provider and for clients and how their process and protocol follows. So I wouldn't say I would rule it out completely, but it's I don't see it on the immediate horizon.
Yeah, and being the senior manager of the IGM program at my office, I'm right there with you, Joe. I think that's a very dicey thing, and not sure I want physical records being residing at someone's residence. So,
Right.
So we have a question here regarding federal record centers closing and the backlog of materials there. Have you seen an increase in customers coming on board at Access due to those closings?
I can say I have. I'm on the East Coast and have seen a few. We've seen centers closing altogether or just not taking anything new. And we've had teams dispatched to go evaluate and support. So we understand that it's sort of a shift in sort of these state and municipalities mindset that why are we, spending all this money on real estate to store this stuff when, I guess why. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing it. I can't speak for everywhere, but it's certainly bubbling up more and more.
Okay. Manuel asks, as users need to digitize their options to do it themselves, or their options are to do it themselves, ask the offsite storage provider to do it, get a service provider to do it, or combinations thereof. Do you have any recommendations for do's and don'ts as they start looking at all these different options?
Yeah, I think the first one is, make sure what you're digitizing actually needs to live in that digital format. It can be very attractive to say everything I have is electronic, but when you really think about it, are you ever going to touch that record again? If not, then maybe that decision is to go sort of that hybrid model that I mentioned before. But even moving forward, as you look at, should I do it myself? Should I trust a partner to engage? Again, when you're engaging a third-party partner, they can typically do it at scale. They have multiple pieces of equipment, many staff members that can move those images through more quickly than you may be able to sitting at a single feed scanner or even something a little more advanced. So that's usually where the cost benefit can start to come into play. And I mean, you have a full-time day job. So do you really want to be spending your time scanning versus focusing on what you're actually there to do? And that's where some of that tipping point can come into play as well. Other do's and don'ts, again, just know who you're working with, make sure that they're keeping information as secure as possible, and vet what their process is and make sure you and your organization are comfortable with it.
Okay. We have a question here on physical records. What do you recommend for physical records that require permanent retention? And in addition to that, how about physical records that contain raised or embossed seals? I didn't even know those were being used anymore.
We have some old stuff in storage, Bill. You never know what you're going to come across.
Yeah. Jean, I can jump in. I think there's certain scenarios where permanent storage, there's obviously a long-term return on investment there if you were to look at some sort of digitization. If it's scenarios where the physical record must be maintained, we do have different levels of secure storage, as well as others have the same, where more of climate controlled environments where those special or more specific records can be kept and held in more protected temperatures, I think, for the long-term preservation of those. So a number of different options. I think when I think of permanent records, generally there's some value to being able to convert them. But as I mentioned, if conversion is not an option, then it's worth looking at if they're specialized, just how those can be preserved without just sitting on a shelf for eternity.
Yeah. To answer the part about the raised or embossed seals, you will that typically still picks up on a scanner. It still shows as an image. But again, most partners would do a pilot with you to see if that if what they're doing captures all of your requirements and delivers back to you everything that you need. So that's something to certainly look into. As far as doing that type of work in-house, I'm not familiar, but I know I've seen like the notary stamps and other sort of embossed seals still record as an image, but it's all up to the quality of the image, what you and your partner have decided the DPI setting should be, and how that image is captured and returned to you.
Okay, great. Margaret's got a question here that we may even be able to get some answers from folks putting in the chat that are practitioners, but I've scanned documents stored on the company servers, and recently IT decided to freeze all documents 2019 and earlier. I'd slap your IT department. Just kidding. Taking away my access. How do I convince them to find the storage necessary to continue access?
Yeah. So I second Bill's no. That may be something where, if you don't have a solid retention program on those images, that may be your middle ground. So understanding what the retention is on everything 2019 and prior, maybe there is stuff that you no longer need to house and can free up some space that way to allow additional space, more room for repository, things like that. That would be my suggestion. Joe, I don't know if you have anything else on that one.
I think the one thing that we've seen more and more of is the need for collaboration between the business and IT when it comes to just records management in general, right? As we have more digital born records and more hybrid mixes of physical and digital, there needs to be a close connection with our IT leadership and ensuring that they know the strategy, the importance of the business records, because it sounds like in this situation, as in many, there's just different silos, and the one silo doesn't understand what's important to the other, and that's where you can run into some of those challenges. So I think we've seen it over the years. We've had to adapt and adjust, and I think strong partnerships internally with IT are really going to pay dividends in the long run.
Okay, and we've got a lot of questions, and if we don't get through them all, we're going to make sure that Jean and Joe get the questions after the presentation, and they can get these answers back to you, because I think there are some that are maybe even very specific to access that I think they can answer after the presentation, and we'll make sure that those are taken care of. Regarding destructions, scenario is a client is concerned about destroying paper files because they are afraid of the just in case it's needed. There's no electronic backup copy. You've explained to the client that the legal department has signed off on the paper copy destruction. What other persuasion techniques do you suggest to calm and convince the client that destroying the paper copy is fine?
Yeah, that's a very common situation. And that's why we're seeing, I mean, that's why we still have so much paper in storage, honestly. That's one of the reasons anyway. I think just having a proper RIM program where you know that you have the information you need You verify it against any requirements, whether that be within your organization, whether you're mandated by some state or federal mandates, to understand what you're required to keep. It also helps to explain that by keeping that information, you're bound for discovery. So understanding the risk in keeping information longer than you need to can also help sort of persuade those decisions. But if you have your digital copy and you're doing everything you should be to keep that digital source safe and updated and secure, you know, I think that sort of is the argument.
Okay. We have some, let's see, a question around procedures that you might have in place for when a disaster occurs within the warehouse that can prevent, mitigate the destruction of stored documents, examples, fire, water sprinklers, that kind of thing.
So just specifics around, I mean, our buildings that we have across North America and the globe all have a specific building code that they need to comply with. But generally speaking, there is the fire protection systems, whether that be overhead sprinkler systems. Some areas require more in-rack systems with early detection, smoke alarms. It's really dependent upon each municipality or each county. I mean, it gets very specific in some areas what amount of protection we need to have. But in general, we do have third-party monitored fire alarms, smoke alarms, intrusion, all the necessary access controls to ensure that it's just our access team members that are able to get into the buildings. And then also, one of the things that's often overlooked from a security standpoint is just the dynamic storage environment that we operate in, where every item is uniquely barcoded within the facility. And that unique barcode is not something that is necessarily identifiable to someone that doesn't have a handheld scanner and access to our software system. So one client's inventory is not all stored in one specific section of a building. We're able to disperse that inventory throughout a building based on, we're scanning the barcodes, tracking them that way, so that if there is ever any sort of situation, the percentage of a client's inventory that could be impacted is relatively small.
Okay. Let's see. There's a lot of these that I'm thinking you guys can just take offline and handle those. Is Access experiencing any space-related issues based on the increase of records moving from offices to offsite storage?
I would just say we're always in somewhat of a state of flux with our acquisitive nature and then also bringing on new clients, new inventory for existing clients. So we're sort of always in the market for new space as we continue to grow. And there are some markets that we have more constraint than others, but we're certainly not in a situation where we would have to tell clients we're not able to pick up. When we have those situations where we start to get full, we are able to go out and find new space to secure and to bring up to our standards and continue to store more records.
We've got a couple of questions around scanning and scanning facilities. So maybe we can kind of summarize it all in one question, but maybe talk about how many scanning facilities you guys have across the country, and then what types of, some of the things that are that I know as far as scanning goes that you want to look for are, things like OCR, the type of review that's done and quality checking that's done after documents are scanned. So maybe talk a little bit about your scanning facilities and the process you guys go through when taking on a scanning project.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. And I guess the first thing I would say is we don't have separate scanning facilities from our physical record centers, which we view as a benefit, because for our clients that are storing physical records with us, if we are to scan something, it doesn't need to leave the facility. It stays within that center. So generally we have a separate area of that facility that we perform the scanning in, but all of our access markets, and I'll say markets because not every facility within a market may have full scanning capability, but every market across North America does have the ability to provide full-scale scanning services. So very basic would be scan on demand, where it's just a file or a number of files that need pulled, scanned, and uploaded into our system, or up through full-scale projects. We do have some of our markets that we consider super centers. And Jean, I don't know if you know the exact number, but I think we're somewhere in the 8 to 10 where we have our large-scale scanning operations within facilities that handle more of the bigger projects, where if a client has hundreds of boxes or even thousands of boxes that they need scanned, we generally try to run those through our markets that we consider super centers. And those are sort of scattered throughout the North American area, just to be able to provide feasible transportation to those as needed.
All right, let's see. Maybe talk a little bit, actually there's a question here about digitization of Aperture cards, which again, obviously very old technology there. And maybe talk a little bit more about how you secure digital records.
Yeah, I can take the securing of digital records piece, Joe. I'll leave the Aperture cards to you. It really all comes down to different systems. I'll speak high level because this should be sort of the table stakes as you're talking to a partner on what they're offering, but understanding the redundancy of their servers, their disaster recovery and control as far as that goes, their different firewalls, a lot of employee security, so making sure logins are tested for strength, that their passwords are locking, things like that. So internal controls as far as who's accessing information, ensuring that internally information that's in a digital format can't be downloaded or exported. So that's within, your third-party partner. Whole lots of IT related information that we spend a lot of time and investment in making sure that we're top of the line. So certainly happy to answer more in depth in an offline conversation, but as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that's one of our biggest investments today, I think, Joe, and correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right. And I would just say, as far as the Aperture cards, I mean, there are ways to scan many different record types, and there's specialized equipment out there for, you name it, microfilm, radiology films, anything you can think of. There's ways out there that we can do it, just different structures that come into play. So if that's something that anyone has additional questions on, I would say reach out to our specialists. Jean and I certainly aren't the ones that would know all the details of that, but we know there's ways.
And if you have a project in that are documents that a client is wanting imaged, how do you handle the need for the client who all of a sudden maybe needs images of documents that you have. Would that fall into that scan on demand type feature?
Yeah, there's a few different approaches. Certainly the scan on demand is, we like to think of that as, even if your inventory is in paper format, as far as you're concerned, it's still digital because that's how you receive it. So scan on demand is certainly part of it. If we're in the middle of a larger project, scanning a larger collection of documents, and something is needed in between, we would typically lay out a project plan before we even got started. So you would know who to contact, because it's Murphy's Law, right? As soon as we take it, you need it. So we would ensure that you had the correct layers of contact to reach out to us, let us know what you needed, and we would put that image to the front of the line, get that scanned for you so you can still proceed with your business. We would never want our work to interfere in your ability to do your business.
Okay. Other than active versus inactive or dead, what other criteria would you use to decide whether to scan or not to scan paper records?
I think it comes back to how often you're going to need to access it, if you're leveraging the cost breakpoints, and then what the useful life of that information is. So there's a lot that can go into, you know, is it discoverable? Are you going to need to provide that elsewhere? Is it legacy information? I think my biggest lever is the active, inactive, and what the retention is on it. That's sort of my guiding principles.
I was going to say retention certainly plays a point, but I think even more so now you have to think about the accessibility of it. Who, not just how active is it, but who needs access to that?
That's a good point too.
Is it people that are around the country or the globe, or just one person in one office? I think those are newer questions that we find ourselves asking.
Well, how about if we take one more, because it's going to be a real quick and easy question, I think, for you. Do you have a Nara certified storage facility in California?
I think the answer is not yet, Joe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm not. Let us get back on that one, because I'm uncertain. We may have one.
Yeah, we do have several in our enterprise, but if California is one, I'm not positive.
Okay. Well, I know we've got a number of questions that we have not been able to get to, but as I said, we will make sure that Jean and Joe get these questions and get an answer back to the folks that asked those questions. So we want to make sure that we're being cognizant of everybody's time. So I want to thank Jean and Joe and the folks at Access for putting this webinar on. And I know that if you've got any questions about their services or those kinds of things, they are more than happy to be contacted and talk to them about those. You can see that we've got their email addresses on this last screen. So with that, again, I want to thank Joe and Jean for the information today. It was a great topic, and I want to thank everybody for attending. And this presentation will come out along with a link in the next couple of days, I think. So I'll be looking for that coming in your email box. So again, I want to thank everybody for attending. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, all.